Well, one of the 1960s rock scene's most mysterious yet captivating figures is finally stepping out of the shadows more than 30 years after her death.
The German supermodel, musician and actor known simply as Nico worked with the influential rock band The Velvet Underground. Here she is in a grungy warehouse, appropriately, in 1982, singing All Tomorrow's Parties.
Well, a new performance piece, the Nico Project, is on show at the Melbourne International Arts Festival, and the actor who plays her, Maxine Peake, joins us now. Good morning, Maxine. Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
Just the audience doesn't know that Michael just outed me that very minute as a Nico fan as you were taking her seat. I love her. She's such a, that voice. It's sort of, some people would screw their noses up and not enjoy it at all. But what's your attraction to her and to playing her on stage?
I think for me, I'd always, not always been a fan, but sort of in my late teens. I think when I first heard her, I had that sort of reaction. It takes a while. And then you just, I don't know, just realise there's something, to me, it's otherworldly. It's like those artists and, that tap into something other, don't they? And there's something very dark about her work. But it's very beautiful as well, and there's lots of elements in there, folk, rock. She's unique. She really is unique.
She had an interesting life. What preparation, I guess, do you do? What research have you done to get yourself into Nico's head for this role?
Well, in the 80s, as you saw in that clip, that was actually, I think it was in Preston, at the library in Preston, in the north of England, where I live, obviously, with this accent. People are going, I can't understand what she's saying.
That's OK, we're doing subtitles for you, Maxine, it's fine.
But she ended up in Manchester. So she spent some of her last years in Manchester, and that's when I think really she, became the artist that she did. I think that's when she got really exciting, but that's when I think, unfortunately, she was ignored in some respects,
Well, she always had lots of blokes around her, though. She had Lou Reed and Bob Dylan. I mean, Bob Dylan was one of her lovers.
Yeah, Jim Morrison,
So, and Andy Warhol, who, of course, discovered her. So is this your attempt to sort of say, hang on, here's the woman and giving her a bit of what she deserves, the recognition?
And I think if you, when researching about Nico, you do realise, I think she had that, she tussled with being a woman. And I think, especially at that time in the 60s, can you imagine being a supermodel? And we find out now what happens, with obviously with the Me Too movement and stuff, but I can't start to think what would have been going on in the 60s. But whatever, but I think as an artist, being able to express herself in the way she did at that time was very difficult for a woman. Nobody really took her seriously. There's lots of people in Manchester I sort of met up with who knew her, she'd be in the local pub in her anorak playing pool. She became... But I think she did these men sort of got hold of her myth, and we wanted to wrestle it back. And because it originated in Manchester, Manchester's got an amazing, rich music scene, but it's very male. And there are some female... I know Nico wasn't from Manchester, but she was a big influence on that scene. So we wanted to go, come on, Manchester, we're going to start celebrating the women that made an influence. And it was about, wrestling her back from that sort of that male stranglehold, really.
That's great, a great concept. Do you think, though, that Nico really enjoyed that era of mystery? She was very keen on promoting about herself?
Yeah, it's interesting when you read about it, because some people say, she was mysterious, and then other people say she didn't really have much to say. Yeah. But again, it's always through the male narrative that you hear about it. It's quite difficult or harder to find women who, and there are women, she had friendships with women who can tell you their experience with her, but it's the men seem to have sort of grabbed her. So it's taking that back.
Terrible addictions, though, she had. Yeah. And heroin was her drug of choice, I think. Yeah, and then a very young death, really, in this day and age, in her late 40s.
In her late 40s, in Ibiza, falling off a bike with... and she was sort of getting clean at that time, I think. There was... but it's interesting, because she was an addict, and I think that's when she ended up staying in Manchester. She came to Manchester to do a gig. They dropped her off at the train station, which is sort of touched on in the piece. Alan Wise, who was a promoter, a famous promoter from Manchester, who fortunately no longer with us. And he said, where are you going? And supposedly she burst into tears and said, I don't know, I've got nowhere to go. And everyone who I spoke to, because there's, you know, still a lot of people around the Manchester music scene who knew at that time, said, you know, the heroin was cheap in Manchester, so she decided to stay, you know.
Sad. Look, I know that people can sort of take her or leave her. I know there was one album, The Marble Index.
Yeah.
You were a fan of that, but there are people who say if you feel the need to be listening to it, then you're in a dark part of your life, and if you listen to it once, then you should never listen to it again. So, I mean, you
Horses
know...
for courses.
Exactly. But look, I'm a fan, and I'm really glad you came in this morning to have a chat, and you're appearing at the Melbourne International Arts Festival.
Yes.
And even if you're not a Nico fan, I think it's worth having a look anyway.
And it's about, you know, it's about being what it means to be a woman and an artist. You know, I flip between Nico and myself and what that means to be a woman and be creative and the cost sometimes. And we've got this fantastic orchestra of young women, majority from the Royal Northern College of Music, and we've got some local musicians from Melbourne as well who've come on board, which is fantastic. So, yeah, it's not just, you know, it's not a Nico biop. You know, it's a piece about being female and an artist, but Nico is our inspiration.
Maxine Peake, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Maxine.
Well, the Banking Royal Commission helped expose deep-seated malpractice